a 7-word whisper that brought a billionaire crashing down right in the middle of the banquet.
Charlie.
The crystal chandelier's cold light shattered onto the white tablecloth, cracking into tiny shards that stabbed the eyes. The heady, ripe scent of aged grape wine at the Macallan 25, just uncorked, spilled out like warm smoke, mingling faintly with truffle and beeswax polished onto wood. Then Keng. The sound of a spoon touching the glass rang sharp thin, long slicing through the air like a fishing line. She paused mid-motion, breath caught in her throat. A chill of metal raced across her fingertips, and a scratch-scarred silver chain glinted beneath the collar of her black shirt, the necklace she always wore on evening shifts. The man at the corner table didn't look at her. Instead, he stared at that scratch. His eyes flickered for a fragment of a second, then turned placid as a frozen lake. Behind him, the window fell straight down into Central Park, like a silent screen traffic lights drifting across like falling stars. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe glowed pale green. His pinky bore a faint discolored mark where a ring had worn the skin. His other hand rested on the phone's edge, its screen dark, but his expression told of flames inside. She lowered the tray. The cool silver surface reversed the wine aroma into her nostrils, sharp and bitter. She heard the maitre d' from southern France's leather shoes gliding across the dark wood floor, the white linens rustling like falling snow, the spoon at the next table twirling in a cappuccino Keng, another thin strike. From the kitchen, the scent of browned butter and pan-seared halibut hit her tongue, bringing a fat richness all the way to her throat. She swallowed. The necklace scratched against her skin again. "Your wine, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice lowered, each word rolling over her tongue like wet pebbles. "Neat," he replied without looking, pausing as if he'd carved a silent interval just for those words to drop. A strange flash passed over his face as she leaned in. She didn't see it, but felt it, his breath hitching like a short piano note unexpectedly struck. She stepped back half a beat, just far enough that he registered the cheap soap mingled with faint sweat on her, and she detected an old tobacco scent clinging to his cashmere lapel, the kind only found in an heirloom wardrobe passed through 3 generations. In the mirror opposite, her reflection was distorted into a thin shadow. The silver chain at her collar glowed muted with sweat and powder, scratched like a winter lake scored with a blade. She'd tried polishing it with toothpaste on her chef's advice. It still bore the scar. Every night shift, it sat there grazing her collarbone like a tiny hook, pulling her someplace she couldn't name. Sometimes, amid the scent of rare roast beef and the whisper of knives, she smelled old rain lingering in that silver. Mr. Sterling's gaze drifted over her shoulder to the long table where his 2 partners were whispering clause 12.4. Non-disparagement in the draft contract uploaded to the data room. One tapped a spoon against a glass Keng sharper each time, as though legalese might line up on its own if the metal's ring was sharp enough. She looked down at the table documents, an ink pen, a tiny red wax seal on the envelope's edge, a corner of paper brushing across the word fiduciary. From her chest, the chain turned cold again. She poured. The aroma of wine wrapped around the tip of her tongue, the burn of alcohol touching her nostrils, eyes watering. Glass against glass, the Keng was clean as a surgeon's incision. A single amber droplet rippled against the rim, hinting at oak raisin burnt honey. She'd memorized those tasting notes, so that if asked, she could cling to words without letting her fingers tremble. Mr. Sterling lifted the glass with 3 fingers, his gaze still fixed not on the wine, but the scratch. "What's your name?" he asked, voice low, like paper pulled across an edge. Lariser." Her tongue stumbled over her own name. A faint corner of a smile passed his lips, but not his eyes. At the next table, a woman wearing Hermès lightly squeezed her handbag's strap, when another server nearly spilled a cuviercle of hot oil onto the cloth. The scent of hot sesame oil rose, followed by a soft, "Ah!" The room shivered, then tuned itself back into silent equilibrium. At Liel, noise was a minor sin. Mistakes were always wrapped in silk. She stepped away, but the necklace felt tethered, gripped by his gaze. The maitre d' cleared his throat behind her. The white cloth draped over his arm quivered, sending a cold breeze across her nape. She nodded and moved faster, sliding through the darkness between beams of light like slipping over a crystal crevasse. Behind, Mr. Sterling set his glass onto its coaster. A needle-like Kang, and she knew he'd come to a decision, though none of his muscles admitted it. At the service station, the zest of lemon peel and freshly ground coffee punched her forehead. She brushed the spot where the chain pressed against her skin. The scratch yawned under her fingertip, rough like fish scales drying. She remembered the chef's words, "Real silver ages like people do." She smiled silently. Her thumb traced a fine seam like an open stitch on the chain's edge. She thought it was a flaw in the welding. Tonight, that split felt half a grain of sand deeper. "Lara, table 7 wants oysters." And the corner table changed to duck à l'orange, the head chef announced, voice dry as crisp parchment. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, her breath not yet fully returning to her lungs. When she turned back, the silver tray reflected the white light until it burned eyes. At the corner, Mr. Sterling listened to a gray-haired partner whispering about escrow and closing. His mouth didn't smile, but his palm pressed onto the table's edge as though needing friction to stay grounded. She set the plate down. The scent of ripe orange and caramelized sauce merged into the air as rich as a melody. Her knee brushed a chair. The chain trembled, tapping like a fingernail on the cup. Mr. Sterling looked up. This time he stared directly at her utter silence, stretching long enough that she heard her own blood rush behind her ears. His gray eyes darkened a shade as the light refracted off the scratched silver. He inhaled shallowly like someone diving who's just found a secret cavern beneath the sea. His tongue touched his teeth, then withdrew. She saw the vein on his neck pulse once, twice, then settle. "Thank you," he said. The word was thinner than paper. "Yes, sir," she responded, stepping back. As soon as she turned away, he leaned toward the lawyer. Not a sound, but his lips moved in 7 short, even pulses. The lawyer blinked, pulled out his phone, fingers swiped fast. The Patek-clad hand tapped the table Kang as light as Morse code on an empty glass. From the darkness behind the curtain, a young man, Marcus from security, shifted eyes fixed on her collar as she passed through the hall. At the bar, she asked for water. The glass pressed cold against her lips. The water smelled faintly of iron, maybe from the pipes, she guessed. She took a sip. It felt like a thin needle down the bridge of her nose. From where she stood, she saw the corner tables reflected in the mirror. A hand reached toward Mr. Sterling's collar, adjusting a lapel, and paused precisely where a tie pin used to sit in old newspaper photos on his sternum. She didn't read wealthy newspapers, but at the salon where she worked morning shifts, there was an old magazine cover behind the counter, Sterling Dynasty, a legacy forged in steel. In it, his face had that same jawline wearing a stylized silver pin, 2 birds facing each other. She swallowed. Her breath now carried her colleague's sweat and cheap detergent, the scent of a 9-hour shift. That sweat rose as the maitre d' placed a hand on her back light as a dagger's tip. "The corner table wants another single malt." "Careful now," he murmured, eyes unwavering. She turned. This time she walked slowly. Her black shoes didn't squeak, just grazed the floor like water over glass. Mr. Sterling's eyes didn't leave her collar, but his jaw was immobile. She set the bottle down, opened it, tilted the glass. The spirit poured like molten amber. Kang, the bar spoon, tapped the lip of the glass. The table froze. The lawyer cut mid-phrase material adverse change. Someone whispered easy. She nearly heard the air's skew. She tasted coal smoke in her nose, leather in the chair. Her tongue felt the bitterness of anticipation. Her fingertip tingled numb like it had just pulled from ice. Everything shrank back into the necklace, a small, scratched silver dot, pulsing, flaring, fading. Mr. Sterling tilted his head very slightly. "Whose is that?" His voice was low enough only the table could hear. She raised a hand without realizing. Her fingertips brushed the scratch. The gritty feel sent a shiver down her spine. "My mother's," she said. "Short, flat. Your mother." He paused, swallowing. In that instant, his pupils widened as if the light had suddenly dimmed. At the next table, Kang, another spoon, clattered down. Someone laughed, voice breaking, disguised by a cough. The orange glaze on the duck à l'orange tasted sharper than usual. She edged back a tiny breath and the chain scraped against her shirt with a soft shoop. The scratch scored her skin like a signature. "Could you elaborate?" His voice turned cold. A wall rose. I don't know anything more. It's always been there," she answered, letting her hand slide away from her neck. Mr. Sterling nodded faintly, but the silence around the table thickened. The lawyer watched him. He didn't look back. His finger found the napkin's edge, folding it into a razor-sharp crease. It had been a long time since she'd seen someone fake calm so well. The maitre d' moved close enough to say without moving lips, "Don't stand there too long." She moved away on impulse, but her ears still caught every inhale. Mr. Sterling turned very slightly, shifting the vanishing point, as if in a painting. That look passed over her shoulder, past the chandelier's light into the mirror. She saw that he wasn't looking at her, he was looking at the necklace. Something flitted across his cheek like cloud shadow. His glass contacted the coaster, Kang's 7 beats equal like a code. The lawyer nodded. The phone buzzed. As she passed the kitchen door, the heat slapped her face like a buttery sting. Black pepper drifted up like a swarm of bees. Next to the dishwasher, scalding water splashed onto the back of her hand. The burning shock snapped her into hyper-alert. She looked down and saw a tiny mark etched into the ring's edge at the seam, an almost imperceptible black dot. It wasn't dust. It was deliberate. She lifted her head. The corner table stood half up. Mr. Sterling never stopped staring at her, but the smooth, polite smile was back. He leaned back, brushed a shoulder lap clean. Then softly, he let those 7 words fall into the room like a stone onto frozen water. She said, "My mother owned this." A delayed beat, a jarred keng. The breath in someone's throat caught. And the dining room with all its icy crystal lights, potent wine scents, the metallic taps of spoons, frozen gazes suddenly skewed off its axis, as if someone turned a long idle key in a lock. No one thought still worked. Those 7 words demolished an empire. The apartment hallway smelled of mildew like a sponge long forgotten in a bucket of stale water. Fumes of cheap medicine bled from the door at the end, sharp mentholated bitter on her tongue. The flickering fluorescent tube overhead sputtered once, then died, scattering jerky patches of light across the stained concrete floor like stranded fish. She tugged the zipper of her thin jacket up to her neck. The cold metal against her skin sent a shiver through her. A cheap wooden frame hung crooked beside the door, a small family photo, 3 smiling awkwardly, before a peeling painted wall. The glass was cracked in a corner, patched with yellowed tape. She brushed dust off it, her thumb grazing the crack rough like a scar. From the room across came the muted hiss of an old TV news blurring with lethargic coughs. The smell of reheated rice and charred dried fish burned through the air. She counted her breaths exhaling through her nose, letting the greasy scent dissolve like a wave. At the corridor's corner, the skinny lawyer leaned silently against the iron banister. He didn't look at her. His eyes tracked worn shoe prints on the floor, stopping at a dark, freshly dried coffee stain on the step's edge. He pulled a sticky note from his pocket, scribbled 2 words, bullet mark, and folded it carefully. No one spoke. All that broke the hush was the click of his pen against carton. She pressed the elevator button. The floor number flickered sluggishly, bing, bing, each arrival marked by a hollow ping. On the ground floor, the door opened into a different world, like slashing from night into morning. A night breeze brushed her face, carrying urban scents of gasoline and old rain. A black car waited its door, thudding shut with satisfying finality. The leather seat hugged her back, scents of new leather melded with the quiet spice of polished wood. The lawyer followed behind, silent, glancing at her worn heels, creased leather scuffed edge, a seam pulled like an exposed tendon. He committed to memory uneven wear, habitual outward gait. As the car turned onto the main road, the city's smell shifted clean gasoline, freshly washed glass, and the whisper-thin cool of air conditioning. The window slid up and street noise dimmed. Passing lampposts traced backward across her face, scattering golden fragments like fallen leaves. She checked her watch. The seconds' hand ticked evenly. Bitter medicine lingered on her tongue, but her nose caught a softer note. Truffle light as a secret. From the front seat, the swoosh of paper revealed the lawyer opening his leather file click. The dry, slightly sour smell of acid-free archival paper mixed with fresh ink. He clipped a paper clip onto the page with a crisp snap. The restaurant door swung open like a shell cracking. The foyer was warm and the scent of truffle immediately filled her chest, rich yet not heavy. Whispering here everything costs. Candlelight flickered across round tabletops, scattering trapped fireflies of crystal onto the cool satin. She rested her fingertip gently on the underside of a tablecloth, slippery like water, chilling in a thrilling way. The tinkle of silverware came from somewhere distant, glass chime, delicate, perfectly timed, too refined to learn in a rougher world. A server approached, bowing just so. On his tray, a bubbling silver cloche mirrored the chandelier. When lifted, a scent rose in layers, first browned butter, then black truffle, and a whisper of sea salt like wind. Her stomach clenched. Warmth brushed her face, opening her pores like dipping hands in warm water. Across the room, Victor leaned forward. His chin caught in the light, their smiles equally thin and brittle as gold leaf. The lawyer remained at the edge near a dark column, quietly counting number of candles. The gap between chair and aisle, the camera angles overhead. He tilted his head slightly, listening the soft tick of a wall clock, followed by 3 camera clicks, either hidden lenses or note-takers. In his mind, he sketched an escape plan. Exits, blind spots, slipperiness of the floor. He lifted a stray fiber from the satin table edge, plucked it onto a crisp slip of paper, folded it, pocketed it habit. She felt like she didn't belong here. Her feet hit the hard floor through thin soles like rainfall on wood. Each step, the hem of her coat whispered against her back, discordant to the silk swish of dresses around her. The scent of expensive perfume, bergamot, iris, sandalwood, hit her a fragrance that could buy silence. She paused before an ornate mirror breath, fogging its surface before it cleared. Around her neck, the silver chain lay cold. The pendant bore a short scratch, like a cat's scratch. She tugged her collar up to hide it. A text pinged in her pocket from a coworker. "You okay?" Her fingers tightened. Yes. The lie smelled of burned sugar, sweet but bitter. She pressed a hand to her abdomen to slow her heart. The maitre d' opened the reservation book, thick pages, handwriting like calligraphy. He read the name Sterling. His voice was silken but cold. His gaze flicked to her just enough to notice her scuffed heels and loose thread, then passed as if he'd never paused. The lawyer silently noted manager's glance valuation. Inside contrast, framed the scene like a stage candles and fluorescence truffle and cheap medicine satin and concrete. Her ears caught a soft clash. Silver spoon cang, then silence like someone snuffed out a spark. All those sounds compressed in her chest, released as a soft exhale. She slid a hand into her pocket, touching the cheap wooden-framed photo she'd smuggled in. The grain of the wood bit into her skin, a twinge reminding her where she came from. She tucked it beneath her order pad, hiding a speck of dry clay in a clean white field. The lawyer glimpsed the dark corner of the frame and nodded. He drifted off the main path, marking one more detail, a 3-centimeter scratch on the table leg aligned with staff movement escape path. A server poured wine, the deep red slashed across the glass rim like a cloak. Alcohol vapors rose, threaded with deep vanilla. From a nearby table came a soft laugh, dry, cracking at the end, like scissors through silk. She inhaled lightly, letting the wine pass her nasal passages without touching them. Her fingers, body accustomed to trays and dishes, now gripped the edge of satin fingertips, sliding as if learning a new song. Through the glass, she glimpsed the cracked paint of the corridor wall, reflected in the gleaming wood surface as delicate grain. The fluorescent flicker became trembling candlelight. The cheap medicine smell layered over truffle, forging a strange scent like recognizing your name in crowds after years. The lawyer passed and paused, a soft clack from the kitchen echoed behind them. He tilted his head ceramic or metal ceramic. Without looking, he marked the tempo on the folder edge 1-2 and continued quietly collecting a receipt showing the counter code, a misaligned name tag, a napkin with a tiny oil ring. Sterling lifted his gaze. His cologne-rich eyes glided over the candle display, settling on her just a beat too long. Silence inflated, then collapsed when the maitre d' cleared his throat. She didn't bow, just inhaled deep enough to stand half a centimeter straighter. A female diner brushed by her fox fur sleeve, grazing the back of her hand. A trace of musk lingered. She shivered but steadied. Here scent connotes status. In the corridor they masked decay with medicine. Here truffle flaunted luxury. Two worlds converged in her throat. Another text from her coworker popped. Proof. She locked the screen, flicked her nail against the tray click. The metal answered clear small. The lawyer stood by the emergency exit, eyes meeting hers for a breath. No words, but in that glance, see and remember. He tapped the folder, a quiet click. Two waiters collided, tray clinked, crumb rolled, skidded, then stopped at her feet. She stooped, picked it up. Butteriness melted on her tongue, habit of the poor never waste. She rose, placed it gently on the plate edge. Nobody noticed, but the lawyer did and stored it. Never waste, steady habit. The background music shifted from jazz to Baroque strings, crisp like rain on wood. The air shifted tone. Suddenly, everything still like the room itself held its breath. The maitre d' nodded softly. She stepped forward, satin brushing her fingertips like water. In her pocket, the frame pressed into her hip, sweet pain. The private room door opened. Candlelight flickered and held. A soft clatter came from the kitchen. Someone had turned down their motion. She swallowed air thick with truffle and butter. Silence held for a heartbeat, then released with the softest scrape of chair legs against marble. She lifted her foot over the threshold. The air hit her ways, cold tickle at her ankle from the AC candle warmth on her face. At the edge of vision, the lawyer remained an ever-gathering shadow, collecting every detail like dust. Half the city smelled of truffle, half smelled of the cheap medicine still lingered in her hair. She walked into the palace with her worn shoes. The candle smoke faded as the private room's door closed softly behind her. The silver tray in her hands trembled ever so slightly. The Riedel glasses clinked like raindrops on crystal. The scent of spilled wine wafted from the next table, sweet at first, then sharp, the alcohol stinging her nose. A camera flash burst through the curtains from the foyer, a stark white bloom that left a dark spot dancing across her vision. Veins pulsed at her wrist with each heartbeat. Her palm, clammy, the tray handle slick under her grip. Her order notebook, an old brown-bound pad with dog-eared edges and a teardrop coffee stain on the bottom, rested under her apron. Every time she brushed her thumb across that stain, it reminded her a late order, a quiet, scolding money saved for her mother's medicine. She stroked the dark patch gently, like soothing an itching scar, bringing relief. Victor leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. The light skived across his cheekbone, leaving a cold silver highlight. His dark suit carried the scent of rich woods, sandalwood, deep and lingering like a promise unwilling to fade. Whose wine spilled, he asked casually, but his gaze locked onto the tray in her hands. She nodded subtly and lowered the tray onto a nearby satin-covered side table. The metal made the fabric recoil for a breath. The whole room slumped into silent stillness. A sommelier approached, presenting a Bordeaux 1982 as if it were evidence. The label was cracked like aged leather. The foil seal glowed like lacquered nails. In a measured tone, he said, "Over 40 years tannins that whisper like wind." The aroma unfolded in layers, blackcurrant leather, a hint of cigar box textbook notes from the court of master sommeliers. Still, the smell of spilled wine lingered like an ugly memory clawing through perfume. She lifted a glass to Victor. Her hand shook. The stem slid softly across the tray before stopping. He didn't look at the wine, he looked at her. His lips curved half an inch upward, his eyes polished like wet stone. "You're the one who spilled Pinot on that guest's shoes last night, right?" His voice was neutral, but the question struck sharp. She swallowed. In her order pad between steak medium rare and risotto with extra truffle, she'd drawn a tiny arrow pointing to table 7, avoid sudden movements. Her private note with coffee overlapping blue ink. She'd taught herself to walk like water slow quiet. Tonight there could be no mistake. A muted shutter sound echoed from the threshold, another flash slicing through the curtains, scattering candlelight. Victor turned his head slightly, giving his assistant a look continue. The assistant shut his phone and nodded. The lawyer, shadowed in the corner, glanced at his wrist, timing each flash roughly every 32 seconds. On the edge of the notebook, he jotted paparazzi pre-cited. "Put down in my notes, beef tartare microplaned garnish," Victor said with the ease of command. She opened her notebook to the correct page. "Yes, beef tartare." Dice finely, only a touch of shallot raw quail egg, she asked, voice flat as glass. No egg. I don't want salmonella." He smiled lightly. City's tone. "Food safety is ISO 22000, darling. You're doing fine." She wrote it down, pen grazing the coffee stain, ink slipped cutting into salmonella. His eyes flicked down. "Your notebook's a mess. Your memory's chain of custody probably is too," he said wryly, as if delivering a legal verdict. In the corner, the lawyer's eyebrows lifted. Anyone using that phrase so precisely must be familiar with records. Chain of custody, the lawyer thought, scent of old dossier resurfacing. He recalled a file swapped in 2005, gray folder, purple ink note spine simply labeled Harmony C. He bit his pen lightly, let Victor's words anchor in memory. This guy knows how to meddle with records. A tray in the kitchen knocked the edge of a table, wine spilled over. A woman gasped. A red blotch spread across satin like a petal. She darted forward, tilting the tray so the cloth trapped the wine. Her hand felt warm. Alcohol slammed into the scratch on her wrist, stinging like a cut. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'll bring a fresh cloth immediately." Her voice cracked, then forced upward, fragile. Victor clapped once, dry applause for a cheap trick. "Well done. But what about my shoes from last night?" He pointed his toe into the candlelight, black leather pointed toe, hand-stitched edges. She nodded quickly. "I requested shoe cleaning vouchers from the care desk, Saphir grade polish. They'll be delivered." "The thing I love is timing," he interrupted, lifting his chin. "Like signing an NDA. Miss the window by a minute and it's void." The NDA word sank like a lead weight. Not every guest uses that word. The lawyer noted 2 loaded legal phrases in one context: evidence concealment. "Chain of custody," he repeated silently. The whispered scent of old files returned. He remembered hospital transfers, internal records, tampered exhibits. He marked the knowledge Victor has a history with files. A server stumbled clack. A tray bumped the table. Another guest's wine tilted as if pushed by wave. The cloth soaked red. She steadied the tray, placing it carefully, stopping the spill dead. Her palm heated the scratch sting sharp. "I apologize, sir. I'll get a fresh cloth right away." Her voice rose and fell, controlled but thin. Victor tapped lightly, mirroring applause. "Elegant. But what about my shoes?" he reiterated, weaving in candlelight reflection. "I asked for vouchers, they said tomorrow." "Delay isn't a crime," she nearly whispered. "A small slip makes no difference, dear," he replied, voice smooth. "Unless you're signing away your silence." Another flash lit the table. The word "dear" flickered. It sounded like disdain laced with obligation. She replaced the glass and stepped back, the notebook heavy against her side. The coffee stain marked her jeans like a brand, a warm, indelible circle. She added a tiny marking in the margin, a downward triangle watch. The music changed, piano notes pressed and held. The room quieted like a sigh. Victor swirled his glass, long, perfect courtesy swirl, and leaned toward her as if to whisper, but loud enough for next table to hear, "You know, I used to serve tables too, a summer on the West Coast, but back then records mattered more. Things had to be destroyed before someone caught scent." The word records hit the silence like a hook. The lawyer looked up. West Coast. Records. Destroyed. He counted his calm breaths. 1, 2, then exhaled. The man just revealed a piece of his past. She bit her lip, faint tang of blood at her tongue's tip. Her heart drummed like sabotage on glass. Her hand shook not from holding the tray, but from shame. The spilled wine on the cloth darkened again, that old smell rising. Suddenly, she smelled iodine C or antiseptic. The memory stabbed that fluorescent corridor, the pungent medicine smell. "I don't like silent films," Victor said, leaning close in feigned warmth. "Speak up. You need something, I'll lay out the runway for you." She met his dark-eyed gaze, deep frigid as black pool. "I'm enough, thank you." The word thank rang off like struck steel. He chuckled faintly, no warmth. It broke at the end like a spoon tapping crystal. A guest at a nearby table angled their phone. Another flash blinked briefly. She inhaled, held, released. In her chest, the cold lump shifted slightly. The sommelier placed a tasting slip for Victor Winery details, serving temp decant time. He skimmed it, pen drawing a fine line, 45 minutes decant, no more. His hand pressed the paper, revealing the edge of a thin dossier underneath acid-free paper gray cover grain, like leather. On the spine, HC 2005 intake. The lawyer straightened in the dim. HC 2005, short for Harmony Creek. Intake meaning intake file. He didn't need to touch it. He smelled the old dossier scent 3 meters away, faint must-aged ink. That kind of paper existed only in 2-decade-old hospital archives. Why was Victor with a private dining party carrying it? She bent to collect a fragment of stray glass, her rubber glove scraping the tile, feeling grit. A shard hesitated in the glove's ridge, poked her finger lightly. She jerked and cracked glass fragment shifted. Finger stung. Breath caught, and she continued. "Let me tip you now, less hassle," Victor said, pulling out his phone. 5% okay, I don't like sweat." That statement hit like a hammer. She looked past crystal-lustered tables to the hallway wall, a crack in paint lines in furniture gloss. Her lips turned pale. She placed the notepad on the side table, rifled to a new page, coffee stain framing the margin. She wrote a note so close to the edge, Table 9, HC 2005 intake. Victor leaned in, hand raised as if to grant mercy. His index tapped the edge of her notebook twice. "You're good at hiding things, aren't you, impressive?" Under candle glow, his face was iron-washed. The camera snapped again. The lawyer stepped halfway, shading half the view. He stored another piece of memory. He knows what you write, vision beyond accident. A droplet of leftover wine trailed off the table's edge into her palm, warm, then cool. She wiped it with a white cloth, tasting tannin on her fingertip, bitter on her tongue. Silence pressed between them like a drawn tight rope. The wall clock ticked 3 beats. She met his gaze. "Anything else you need?" "Yeah," Victor said softly. "You still need to learn the right apology." He slid a thin envelope toward her. Inside, a shoe-cleaning voucher and a blank NDA Thorne & Partners law firm's logo stamped in the corner. She froze. The lawyer inspected authentic logo, proper font, but ink, newer than paper, a hurried forgery. "Read it," Victor said quietly. "Sign here. Promise to forget last night. I'll let you go." The tone carried an ironic harmony, a practiced necessity. She opened the page. Her hand trembled so the paper creaked. The drafter's name had been partially scraped off, but 2 letters remained, HC. She exhaled sharply. The memory of HC 2005 intake resurfaced, not random. The wine smell thickened again, filling her mouth with bitterness. She folded the envelope closed and set it aside. "I don't sign what I don't understand." Victor arched an eyebrow. "Simple. You forget last night. I forget the shoes. Plus 5%. The lawyer tapped her wrist, an unspoken cease. He pulled his phone, began drafting a subpoena, Deuces Tecum, saved as a draft. All they needed was a pretext. She took a half step back. The coffee-stained notebook lay between them, boundary line. On Victor's side, clean paper and sandalwood. On hers, spilled wine sweat and old coffee stains. "I'm sorry for the glass, but I won't sell my silence." Her voice didn't shake. Victor paused, then smiled a frozen grin. Silence. Did you think you had something to sell? He tapped her note again. Some things the ocean swallows and they're gone, sweetheart. The lawyer stopped breathing for a moment. Ocean. West Coast. Harmony Creek. Intake. A thread slipped from his sleeve. In his mind, he knows the missing. He just admitted. A plate clang came from the adjacent table. She held herself firm while a world inside her threatened collapse. The scent of spilled wine now mingled with sweet candle smoke like burnt candy, fragrant, then choking. She looked at her hand knuckles whitened. The pad of her index was warm heat, seeping through the coffee stain smell, coalescing heavy as a vow unspoken. Victor leaned close, whispering, or perhaps to everyone. Here people learn to be silent. Candlelight reflected briefly in his eye, slim as a razor edge. She shifted to reclaim distance. You have the choice. People learn silence when pushed. He smiled again softly, but loud enough to own the moment. The smile shattered against the table's crystal. He smiled, and her heart shattered along with it. The glass fell. The first sound was a dry, brittle crack, then the skid and scatter of shards like ice raindrops skittering across stone. The rim of the glass split open into jagged cogs. The stem rolled once, tapping the edge of the side table tap, then lay still like an extinguished eye. Red wine surged up in the air, sharp and heavy, mingling with the scent of burning candle into a perfume that was both sweet and bitter, making her bridge of the nose burn. No one spoke. Silence compressed the room like a velvet-lined box. The chandelier's light caught something metallic dislodged from beneath her shirt, in her startled freeze the silver chain. It suspended in midair for a single breath, catching an icy shaft of light before coming to rest. Against her skin, the 925 hallmark gleamed as fine as a pinhead. The clasp bore a delicate scratch, a faint gray slash, crossing the silver like a scalpel's mark on spring steel. She held her breath, her lungs pressing up against her sternum, then falling downward like a stone into a deep well. Victor stared not at her, but at that chain. His pupils narrowed, then widened, then slipped back into placid calm as though nothing had happened. Yet both forefingers tapped the tabletop 2 beats exactly half a second apart, an involuntary count. The sommelier knelt quietly, whispering apologies as he swept glass fragments away. Each bristle brush along the floor sounded faintly like snow. She bent with him, one hand holding the chain in place, the other pressing the napkin onto the wine stain. Her palm contacted cold moisture, the alcohol seeping through a scratch burning with the acidity of ants. The candle wavered. She felt a breath press against the back of her neck, shallow and fast. She did not turn, but she felt the heart beating there. Careful. Victor's voice was softer than polished stone. A precious thing broken is such a waste. His hand drifted forward as though to guide the clasp back in place. She edged back. The light traced across his cheek into shadow. In the corner, the skinny lawyer, everyone's imagined dotty patron, shifted his stance, placing himself precisely between her and the paparazzi camera peeking through the curtains. He looked up at the chandelier, then down to the chain. From that vantage, he noted the extremely subtle transition of the clasp fine machining only done by refinishers. He smelled a hint of iodine, a trace of antiseptic impossible to detect unless you'd spent years working in hospital files. Jewelry doesn't survive surgical theaters unless it came attached to a patient chart. The paparazzo clicked again. Flash seared through the curtains, lighting up the silver like a knife. A speck of dust glinted across its surface and vanished. At the adjacent table, a Leica shutter took tack. If the photo's EXIF could be pulled, it would read 90mm 2.8, 150 sec, ISO 1600. At that focal length, the hallmark is legible. "Let me see it," Victor said softly, offering his hand as a polite gesture. Fine jewelry deserves to be shown off. She held the chain tightly. "Leave it where it is," she whispered, voice cracked by suppression. Her nostrils burned. Her throat felt as dry as parchment. The sommelier offered another napkin and stepped back. The lawyer casually remarked, 925 silver finished in this way usually means refurbished. Skilled polish, but you leave a directional grain like this. Victor turned slightly, a faint smile playing across his features. "You're well informed. It's my job to tell real from fake," he replied, eyes still trained on the chain. His vision caught 3 microscopic etched dots on the inner clasp so fine they resembled coordinate ticks, part of a micro-engraving style only someone used to electric engraving pens would recognize. A faint HC5, but the last letter obliterated. He swallowed. The smell of old file papers rose again, even though the room was filled with satin and wine. Victor leaned in, his breath warm, redolent of sandalwood, beneath that faint hints of peppermint shaving cream. He spoke so she could hear, "Don't let any mistaken identity get you into trouble." His fingertip tapped the table once, tap echoed inside her like broken glass on her bones. "What are you referring to?" she asked. Her tone had steadied, but her chest still beat like a captive heart. He offered no answer. Instead, an assistant placed a tray before him holding a small velvet box embossed with the Mariani jewelry hallmark. In exchange for that, Victor said, smiling, a token of apology. He opened the box to reveal a plain white gold chain. At its center, a sapphire blue as deep as a lake. Candlelight danced in its facets, stunning, odorless, unblemished. She looked down at the gift and traced a fingertip across the velvet. It felt cool as dew. Then she drew her hand back, resting it over the scratched silver chain at her chest. Its chill penetrated the fabric, a colder, harder, more real chill. "I won't exchange it." Her breath cut in two. Half rose upward, half pooled in her lungs. In the corner, the lawyer retrieved his phone and opened a template litigation hold. Preserve all ESI related to HC 2005. Spoliation risk. He added in pencil on the napkin's edge clasp, EELS tag. People skilled at hiding often tag items at what appears to be mere adornment. Lose sight, and you lose everything. "Let's get back to business," Victor said, easing the tension like a controlled release. He signaled to the sommelier. The silver spoons tapped cups in reply, tink sharp and precise. Everyone flinched, then silence thickened again. She stood straight. The red stain on the floor had faded, but the smell remained wet wool in the humid heat. She tasted a fine salt on her lips, whether from sweat or tears she couldn't say. Victor leaned over, murmuring so only his assistant would hear, wipe it off. "Don't leave any metadata." The lawyer's eyes flickered. Metadata. EXIF data. SHA 256 hashes. Chain of custody. A shard of glass under someone's shoe had scratched through it all. The echo of crystalline rain now mimicked the beating of her heart. "Excuse me?" she said softly, ducking her gaze before slipping her hand behind her neck to conceal the clasp. But the mirror gleamed behind her. Its close-up caught that metal hook like a signature etched in silver. The lawyer had already positioned himself to catch that reflection. He knew everything. He drew a small UV flashlight from his jacket, more habit than plan, and covered it with his hand, casting a violet streak across the clasp for a fleeting second. Enough to reveal 2 faint dots, like stellar alignments. HC. The candle's scent turned unexpectedly sweet, perhaps melted into the red wine onto the floor, creating a syrupy vapor. Her throat felt parched. She swallowed. Her breath caught, then rose as if surfacing from deep water. When she opened her eyes again, they locked with Victor's. For a moment, masks were gone. Recognition lay bare. And then he closed the curtain, his smile back in place. "You startled me," he said, voice gentle as coaxing a child. "It's just a necklace after all." She heard blood pulse in her ears. Fingertips defrosted despite the lingering warmth of wine. A metallic note tickled her tongue. She placed the tray down and turned her gaze to the lawyer. His clipped hand rested on a cup as though untouched. He didn't meet her eyes, only placed the folded napkin on the edge of her table. On it, in a pencil stroke as thin as a hair, were 3 words, "Leave it intact." Leave it intact, a phrase of command in evidence law. She nodded to herself, if not to him, pulling the chain close to her skin, letting the clasp graze against her sternum, a chill so sharp it made her feel alive. The light flickered again through her tears not yet fallen. Victor nodded. The assistant closed the velvet box, the bag's scent mingled with wood polish, dry and sharp. She stepped back, feeling the edge of the seat at her knees. The chain snagged on a stray hair, her jaw tightened at the brush. The private room door settled slightly ajar. A breeze of cold rushed in, tapping crystal with a soft cascade. The sound loosened the tension in a few hearts they exhaled. And then everything recompressed when Victor slid the gray folder deeper into his briefcase, where the HC 2005 intake spine peeked from behind the tab, just a glimpse. Enough for some memory to latch onto it. She spoke voice-centered. "My station will bring the main course. Before that, I need a photo of the broken glass for report policy." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Photo, huh? What app does that?" "Your chain of custody for glass," he joked. But the lawyer already clicked images wide-shot, mid-close-up triple capture following ISO 21043 for forensic documentation. Click, 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 each auto-logging a hash. The UV lamp's faint warmth still lingered on his fingers. "All set?" Victor asked. His spoon tapped sharply. She met his eyes. The dull line of the chain between them felt like a wire chevron in the clasp, long, deliberate, like a half-hearted signature. Somewhere beyond, a kitchen bell chimed a single tone. She inhaled, held, then released. "It's not jewelry." She met Victor square on. At the clasp, there are 2 faint letters, hospital registry marks. Someone just photographed it. "In your file is the HC 2005 intake, and you asked to wipe metadata." She paused, each phrase heavy on satin. "That is not jewelry, it is evidence." Silence hung dense as candle smoke. A page rustled sharp as a sliver of blade. She didn't take a step back. Victor faced her, his view now dominated by a thick gray dossier laid firmly before him. It weighed half the room with its presence, 80 GSM rag paper watermark faint in the fibers, its right corner pinned with a dull brad. The cover emitted the smell of aged paper, a dust-dry scent laced with a faint trace of smoke, like files that have survived flames. She cracked the cover open. A cool breeze from the air conditioning whispered in between the pages and brushed her bare wrist. "You said that's just jewelry," she stated, voice crisp. "Then look at this." The first print slid out with a metallic click, a vintage gelatin silver print edges fading into a cracked white border. Candlelight hit oxidized silver halide, and a cold shaft of light skated across the image. It revealed a silver chain, its clasp scratched diagonally at a 30-degree angle, photographed in a hospital intake room 20 years prior. The corner bore a dot matrix timestamp, intake, HC 2005. At the bottom, a nurse's signature in blue ink, slightly blurred, still carrying the faint tang of acidic ink. Victor laughed with just his lungs. "A blurred photo. You want to bring my past into court?" She remained silent. The slim lawyer in the corner slid forward a long envelope without looking at anyone. She withdrew a chain of custody ledger, 3 signatures each with UTC timestamps, a SHA-256 hash of the original scan, and the case ID HCMC 15042 pressed to paper with a rustle. A lignin-rich scent rose, recalling musty archive stacks. Their statisticians call it the breath of the file. "This photo," she said, tapping the page in time, "has been validated under FRE 901. Custodian signed it. A darkroom technician provides affidavit. The EXIF on the scan shows the original timestamp. This isn't nostalgia, it's admissible evidence." Victor tilted his chin. Light carved across his eye and vanished. "Who taught you to speak in legalese? Someone who counts 0.5-second intervals?" She replied, not turning. The lawyer's fingernails tapped the table in response, offset to 0.4 seconds, a tiny jolt in the room's nerve center. She turned another page, this one a Mariani Labs repair report on cotton stock paper smooth as spoonbacks. The artisan's note read, "Clasp refurbished, micro K, HC retained. Scratch at 30 degrees is inherent. A red wax seal bore a small bloom of trapped air pine resins, lingering burn, still faint." Victor's shoulders dipped slightly. A jeweler just selling restoration services, so what? She slid a second vintage photo across to the sommelier. His fingers were slick with sweat and the paper hissed across the table. It showed the clasp's underside under UV a purple glow marking two tiny dots, those HC initials matched by an archival fax from Harmony Creek Intake Ink, silvered and worn. The faint signature of Robert Finch glowed like a blade. "You know Finch," she said. He received $2 million via bearer bonds from the Cayman Islands to bury a dossier. That fund was mapped to a vendor code in your corporation's ledger. The forensic accountant traced it through a routing number mislabeled in your CFO's spreadsheet, which someone forgot to scrub metadata from. The lawyer tapped the binder's spine. Rule 37. E for spoliation deleting ESI invite sanctions. He spoke to the air, but his words lanced Victor's ear. The saline burn of old sweat mingled with sandalwood on his collar. Victor softened documents could be fabricated. "I have my own expert. I will." Before or after the litigation hold, the lawyer cut in his gaze on the teacup. He slid another envelope forward. Data preservation notice sent this morning, DKM signed receipt from sterlingindustries.com at 090713Z in the header. Anything after that is destruction of evidence. She turned one last page, a technical measurement photo, a bare silver chain over a ruler. Inner circumference, 18.0 mm notch at 30 degrees, matching the clasp on her chain. She placed the chain against the photo, just right, overlapping the scratch under candle glow. The sommelier swallowed. The wine aroma turned thick and the paper smell deepened. "You love numbers," she stated. "So correlate these. The scene photo's hash is BF9C E81D. The old photo scan has the identical hash on the clasp area. OpenCV patch match gives a 0.94 correlation. That scratch is a match." Victor's jaw tightened. His assistant shifted, the table like a rolled, colliding with the wooden frame clank. A female guest's gaze pierced across the scene to the brown folder she held. "That is in your briefcase," she said calmly. "The intake tab is there. We just need one explanation. Why is the HC 2005 hospital file here at dinner with you?" Victor opened his mouth, then shut it as though wind were knocked out. A spoon hit the outer room ting. Silence reformed. The lawyer drew up a last page, a creased photograph curling like shell. A hospital bed, a woman's hand wearing that chain knuckles crossed by a hooked scar, slender and precise between the second and third metacarpal. He tapped on the scar. She pulled up her sleeve. Candlelight swept over pale skin. There lay the identical scar. No candle smoke, no wine scent, just the authentic imagined tang of old blood. Victor staggered back half a step, heel nudging the carpet. Candles sighed. No one spoke. She inhaled deeply. "I checked with the storage facility this morning. Their archive caught fire last year, 3 bins scorched. The smoky odor you smelled is from those charred files." She sniffed. A bitter burn hit her throat. "Someone removed one intake folder just before the fire, signed JS. The signature matches the ledger tab in your case. I won't say his name, but you know." Victor glanced swiftly. A bead of sweat formed behind his ear. His collar scent burst. He clenched his hand. The clasp clicked once. "You have room to maneuver." She lowered her voice half a notch in concession. "Open the briefcase. Put the intake tab on the table. Let us photograph it wide mid-close. Seal it. Counsel receives a copy tonight. Tomorrow we file a motion to preserve evidence and notify the court. You won't be held in contempt." Victor chuckled a dry, grainy sound. "You think you're commanding a hearing? This is dinner." "No," she said. "So is my evidence. The paper smells different. The scratch speaks. The photo writes it all. This is not jewelry. This is proof." She slid the historical photo and the intake fax in front of him, the candlelight tracing the scar's diagonal. The lawyer silently nodded, just a flicker to those who know. Complete. Victor did not move. His assistant stepped forward, half shielding him. The lawyer's gaunt fingers brushed the briefcase's clasp, just a whisper of contact. But the lock rang metal ting and every eye snapped to that glint. "A 2-minute window," she said, checking her watch. The seconds ticked like jurors. "After that, I call the overnight bailiff for a writ of preservation." Execution of evidence can happen at midnight. Whistle or tip. Victor's lips pursed. You saw someone at the warehouse gate this morning, didn't you? A black BMW, dark window, pristine plate. Did your lawyer walk there? She stayed steady. The cold shock rolled down her spine, clues still trickling out. The smell of aged leather shot stronger near him. His cufflink glinted silver, two mirrored swans, a logo she recognized faintly from the burned roof of the hospital's annex. The lawyer cleared his throat. You're attacking the credibility of the custodian, he stated evenly. Classic. But blood doesn't drive a BMW. Victor's grip on the briefcase slackened, then repositioned. A candle dropped a drop of hot wax onto the silver tray, dripped the scent of burnt beeswax, melding with charred paper, heady and sharp. Okay, Victor said, voice flat, razor thin. You win this round. He unclasped the case. The intake tab came into view, marked in the nurse's handwriting, intake. Beneath it, an index labeled Archive Bay 3. A corner of a receipt peeked out, signed JS in left-handed loops. The lawyer pivoted his phone, capturing every angle, tack, tack, tack. Each shot registering a hash UV strobe slightly warming the scene from his palm. Victor tilted his head slightly in a quiet nod. You win. His voice rasped as though just exhaling the ash of a cigarette. But remember yet, you don't know the full story. The hotel's conference hall glowed under media coverage lighting. Hundreds of halogen bulbs illuminated the black velvet podium, turning the microphone into a cold silver streak. Camera flashes popped roughly like dry rain. The scent of spilled red wine from row 3 rose sharp and clinging, blending with the smell of freshly vacuumed carpeting. On the stage lay the acquisition agreement embossed with the corporation's logo, thick cotton paper, whose grain rubbed in her fingertips like a reminder every signature carries friction. She tapped the mic. A small boom, then silence. The breath of the room folded inward tight as a calm lake before a storm. Esteemed shareholders. She began, her voice calm yet resolute. Last night, the Court of Chancery in Delaware issued a TRO, a temporary restraining order against the destruction of Sterling's documents. Under Regulation FD, any material information must now be shared with all shareholders equally. Tonight, we comply. A single heartbeat of silence followed. In the wings, the lean lawyer nodded ever so slightly. His phone glowed green DocuSign from the custodian, just marked completed. A single glass clink from the bar signaled the end of the hold. She lifted the contract to chest level. This is the 2005 acquisition addendum for HC Port. The two critical pages, Intake and Archive Bay 3, were intentionally removed from the archival copy. They are now restored. She slid each page under the overhead camera, the crisp rustle ringing through speakers. On the LED behind her, the signature JS, with its hooked J and swooping left-handed S magnified under flashlight. A reporter leaned forward. Are you alleging fraud? Rule 10b-5 under the SEC identifies this as misstatement and omission in securities transactions, she replied, scanning the room with steady eyes. And if you're talking destruction of evidence, SOX Section 802 requires retention for at least 7 years, an obligation ignored here. Vien Thong Tin Phaplut. Reuters, SEC. Murmurs rippled across the audience. In the front row, Victor straightened his tie. His smile thinned. A droplet of wine escaped his glass plink on the table, and a bitter scent rose. She didn't look at him. She angled the mic to pick up soft breaths. Before I read the minutes, she continued, I'd like you to hear this. She pressed play. The click of a briefcase, the rustle of the intake tab removed a male voice. No one checks that old storage room. Timestamp 1907, 13Z after the litigation hold. The room held one more breath. One hand clapped, then two, then three. Applause consolidated into a measured rhythm. Don't theatrics? Victor stepped forward half a step, the flash lighting his face momentarily. That audio is rubbish. The lean lawyer stepped into the light impassive. Hashes and chain of custody have been submitted to the docket. Blue Book citations are attached. He presented a wax-sealed envelope, the scent of warm seal wax, faint but tangible. If needed, we'll call the bailiff. She cut in swiftly. Here is the affidavit from the nurse on duty during the fire, the notary ID NYA4822. She positively identified the clasp with its 30-degree scratch, something only one who handled it would know. She stepped across the stage in a hushed scrape, the mic cable whispering over the floor. You said it was just jewelry. She held up the contract in one hand and pulled a close-up shot of the chain in the other. Yet last night in front of the press, the chain on my neck matched micron for micron, the archival photo from 2005. The LED displayed OpenCV correlation 0.94. A female shareholder whispered, "That's significant." Another inhaled sharply. She lowered her gaze to the signatures. It's time to make a choice or resign. Then methodically, she tore the addendum section off, leaving the main agreement intact, preserving protective provisions. The tear echoed through the mic. Flashbulbs bloomed. In the third row, a server stumbled on spilled wine glass shattered crackle. The red scent soared. She placed half the torn contract in the silver tray, stained red like an undeniable seal of conscience. We demand, she said, eyes locked on Victor, his immediate removal trigger of clawback per Dodd-Frank. Section 954, independent investigation and submission of all transaction logs to the SEC by 5 p.m. today. Every breath paused. The independent chair rapped his gavel, thunk, thunk, thunk. Vote. The screen lit up with blue and red squares. Faces glowed in shifting light as votes were cast. Victor stared familiar faces turned away. His eyes drifted outward like glass sliding from its frame. Voting results 78.4% in favor. A murmur rose, then applause thundered. Staff scrubbed the wine stain on the floor. Low, rubber-soled footsteps muffled the ritual. Victor leaned into the mic. You'll regret this. You... He stopped, his voice cut off. The mic clicked dead cut. The lawyer had pulled the XLR cable from the mixer, small but conclusive. Without looking at Victor, he handed the nearest reporter a sheet, the SEC tips, complaints, and referrals form. Ink sharp as cut lettuce. A Daily Ledger reporter raised a hand. Do you deny JS is Julian Sterling? Victor paused mid-breath. Flash caught cufflinks, two swans facing off, an insignia uncanny to the hospital archive. She scribbled in her notebook, Twin Swan's former logo, who holds the old key clue, hung in the media glare. The secretary declared effective immediately. A security detail approached non-aggressive invitation. Victor jolted. His glass tapped the table wine splashed across his tie. Deep tannin note. He sighed dryly. You think removing me ends it? You don't know the port has more than one key. The weight of his declaration landed slick as the wine. She raised the mic, her voice steady. You will receive the forensic report within 72 hours. All other leads, we have filed a draft subpoena with the Chancery. Her hand brushed the cold silver tray, a reminder that truth inflicts its cost. Applause surged again, deeper, more relieved. In the lobby, camera shutters chattered. The scent of wine and vinyl backdrop filled the air. A live ticker blared, TRO Cess clawback words, sharp as pins. She gazed at the wine-stained contract half in the tray at the chain above which loomed on screen. Her heartbeat returned to pace. Nearby, the lean lawyer spoke quietly to a reporter, then looked toward her. Prepare the habeas for the old archives, you'll need it. The phrase, the old archives, lingered a side door opening in the maze scent of aged varnish, beckoning to secrets, yet unrevealed. She lifted her head, flash and stage lights reflecting in her eyes, ready for the post-signing reckoning. An empire crumbled here before its watchers. Dawn parted the thin curtain as if someone had stretched a finger. Cool yet gentle light crept along the edge of the wooden table, touching the silver chain quietly resting on a white paper napkin. Tiny scratches sparkled like fingerprints left by time itself. Somewhere overhead, birds trilled atop a tin roof. The warm, bitter scent of freshly ground coffee wafted in through the window, mingling with the fresh soap aroma of a blouse hung to dry overnight. She sat on the windowsill, fingertips tracing the cool surface of the pendant as she rotated it in daylight, like rebalancing memories after a stormy night. Her phone buzzed, filed. No exclamation mark that was telling of the lean lawyer's restraint. He'd attached a screenshot from the SEC's Edgar Form 8K, filed at exactly 0701. Material weakness disclosed. Clawback initiated. Below it, a PDF, the Delaware Chancery's consent decree, embossed faintly like the echo of a gavel still resonating in the paper. She took a sip of coffee. The bitterness snapped her tongue awake, then softened as a brown sugar swirl dissolved. In the kitchen corner, the kettle's lid rattled. Steam fogged the glass window. A warm, metallic note lingered as if heralding that home rhythm had returned. The tension of last night unwound and her chest released with one long exhale, sounding like a spoon's gentle tick against the porcelain cup ting. She opened the brown envelope that had waited by the door all night. Inside was an elegant invitation embossed with a hidden motif, Office of Integrity and Trust Restoration Director. The next line, Internal Scholarship Program, full tuition reimbursement for postgraduate studies. It came with a signed offer and a temporary ID card, her photo smiling faintly, but genuine. A handwritten note from the independent chair followed, pen slanted slightly. Left a mark of someone who always suppressed emotion in favor of principle. Thank you for keeping us on the right side. Don't let us forget. Silence filled the room, interrupted by a gentle knock, steady quiet. She opened the door. Her mother stood there, silver hair, a thin wool scarf around her neck, faint eucalyptus on her. She held a cheap wooden photo frame tightly. The family photo inside now gleamed behind fresh glass, clear bright, like the way this morning felt when she looked at it. Her mother paused, breathing in memory, then smiled. They said it's done, dear. Without words, she hugged her mother. The scent of worn fabric and coffee mingled, delivering a reassurance no law could grant. On the table lay the silver chain between two documents. The escrow handover confirming the employee trust, a benefit fund frozen for years, was unlocked, and a court decree affirming rightful inheritance for those deceived into signing the restructuring. The once-glass empire had been dismantled, replaced by small pension flows, landing with proper names. An ethical reward without fanfare. The old cook phoned voice, bright with pride, saying her medical surgery had finally been retroactively covered. The cleaning lady left a voice message in shards of joy. Our house is ours again. She placed the chain in her mother's palm. The metal's soft click whispered against her mother's fingernail. Then all went still. Dawn light through the window made the silver gleam scratch gone polished away by a craftsperson who preserved history's trace rather than erase it. I thought it was lost. Her voice was calm, low. Not lost. Her mother smiled, eyes glistening, just waiting for the right hands. Her phone buzzed again, a blurb. A calendar alert. 0930, probate court final hearing to receive. Letters testamentary so forgotten dividends could be properly transferred. She looked at her mother. Shall we go? Her mother nodded, leaning into her arm. The old shoes on her feet had worn down heels. She bent to tie them, shoes squeaking quietly as leather shifted, an intimate sound of perseverance. Light spread up the stairwell in waves. Neighbors opened their windows. Birds shifted to morning melodies, thicker, more exuberant. On a landing, a boy cradled a cat. Warm fur and dusty sun smelled hopeful, as if mornings always cheered you on. She touched the iron handrail. Cold, but not biting. Last night it had been ice in her bones. Today just a railing. The bus bounced over a pothole, the fare card beeped. Hints of new seat plastic wafted, and someone's warm bread bag sent a comforting hunger surge. She opened the file's aged paper archive, sent page turns sharp as a small blade cutting through the cover. Each received stamp felt like a survival milestone in a place once thought deserted. And then the lawyer's message flicked again. Bay 4. Her heart paused. Everything for the past 2 months was about Bay 3. Bay 4 wasn't in any catalog. He'd attached a blurry photo, a twin swan cufflink in evidence with tiny engraving on the back, HC04. The metallic dryness of it seemed to leap from the image. She swallowed, smothering a question. Dawn was beautiful, but as light rises, shadows sharpen. The courtroom was startlingly empty, as if the city itself conspired to safeguard those falling behind their lives. Her shoes clicked in echo on the stone floor. The scent of floor wax mixed with old paper made her feel she belonged somewhere where rules were lower than people, but safe like a cradle. The clerk handed her mother a pen, an old Parker with a soft nib. "Sign here, ma'am." Her mother's hand trembled slightly. She warmed her with her palm skin shading skin. The handwriting emerged slow but steady. The scratch of ink on paper sounded like a spark relighting a stove. Outside, sunlight had grown warm. The two of them stopped at a faded sign cafe on the corner. Black coffee arrived with a clack. The brown foam rippled, then settled. She bit into buttery bread, crisp breaking between her teeth. The butter melted simple enough. In the corner TV, the morning news replayed last night's clip mic torn contract flash. The owner pointed, "That's your daughter." Her mother smiled, not at the TV, but at her. In the afternoon, she visited her new office, a small room on the 7th floor window overlooking rooftops and flying birds. Fresh paint mingled with the smell of old files from bankers' boxes she'd just moved in. A stapler lay loose on the desk. She clicked it tack, a sound pristine. On the schedule, drafting an internal chain of custody protocol. Rebuilding a retention schedule to align with SOX 802, training managers on Reg FD. These dry words felt warm now that they were hers to carry. A knock. The lean lawyer stood in the doorway, worn collar holding an unsealed envelope. "Congratulations on the title," he said evenly. "And I thought you'd want to see this." Inside was a yellowed Polaroid, a port pier in background, a weathered sign reading faintly, Bay 4 Archive. In the corner stood a man facing sideways. On his wrist glinted the twin swan cufflink. That archival scent leapt back like opening a chest that shouldn't be pried. He added a slim USB checksum valid. "If you want to release it to press, wait a few days. Let justice outpace keyboard." She didn't ask. "Where'd you get it?" He didn't say. Their eyes met 1 second, weighted like a stone. She nodded, propping the photo against the pen cup. The tension that had passed condensed into a vow with another tomorrow. That evening, she came home early. The apartment let in occasional drafts. The curtains touched the table softly. On the shelf, the silver chain lay under a desk lamp, shining as though new. She put it on. Cold at first, warming against her skin. In the mirror, she saw someone both old and new, not the adrenaline-torn person of last night, nor the fear-curled figure of the night before. Just ordinary, with an extraordinary object and a choice far stronger than she'd expected. She turned on her rig, opened her broadcast channel. The live red light glowed. She heard her own breath in the mic. The city's hush paused itself like it was giving her the opening line. "Hello, everyone," she said, her voice warm, the exhaustion melted away. "Today I'm not going to recount last night. I want to talk about this morning, the dawn light, the birds, the coffee, and a chain shining again." She paused. A beat held for silence. "I learned that the law isn't just a rope around what's wrong. Law also opens a path for what's right. When that Form 8K filed, when the employee fund was unlocked, when letters testamentary finally arrived in gentle hands, that's when rules become justice. And sometimes to begin, it takes one small act holding on to a small truth, not letting go." She glanced at the chain, brushing its faint scar, now a soft mark like a birthmark. "I don't know who placed the twin swan cufflink in evidence. I don't yet know what Bay 4 contains. We'll find out. In time. Truth endures in daylight, especially the dawn." She concluded, "Let me ask you what small act, one word, a choice to stand, a scrap of paper you kept, has ever changed your life's direction? Leave it in the comments so someone else can borrow your courage when they need it. If you want to walk forward with me through the unopened doors, subscribe, ring the bell, and share this with anyone deciding whether to stay silent or use their voice." She cut the recording. Silence reclaimed the room, just the hum of dawn insects and the soft tick of spoon on porcelain ting. She leaned her forehead against the frame of the window, watching the aftermath of dawn, the light without urgency now. In the distance, a train whistle sighed across the bridge. Her mother slept quietly in the bedroom, each breath stitching back an invisible tear. The chain lay steady round her neck, warm with skin light within her heart. Sometimes a small act changes a whole life.